everyone. My name's Shadia and I'm beyond excited to be doing a talk today for the Reframing Autism webinar series. So today I'm going to be talking about the importance of embracing authentic autistic identity. This is something that I personally have found extremely empowering, and often when I've been working with my young mentees, they've also found it very empowering and encouraging as well to see the strengths behind their autism. So, a bit about me before we get started. I'm the founder and owner of Autism Actually. So, I do things like advocacy work, speaking, mentoring, and also making artwork. I'm also an ambassador to the Yellow Ladybugs organisation, who try and create opportunities for autistic girls, women, and gender diverse individuals. I'm currently attending university and I'm studying speech pathology with the hope of eventually providing animal assisted therapy for autistic and neurodivergent individuals. So some of my areas of interest are obviously neurodiversity, autism, art, music, animals, and of course therapy. And I'm also proudly non-binary and part of the LGBT spectrum. And I came out publicly about this early 2018. My autism journey started when I was 3 years old. That's when I was diagnosed with autism. I was lucky to have found a extremely good professional who was able to pick up on my presentation. And I was then diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder at the age of 14. I found out about my autism when I was about 8 years old. And the way I found out about this is the primary school I went to had a program specifically for autistic and neurodivergent kids. And we did things like life skills programs. We had computer club at lunchtime to provide us a safe space to socialize with each other away from that dreaded playground area, which can be a bit of a social minefield. And one day I saw this poster that said autism. I can't remember what specifically it was. It might have said signs of autism or meltdown or something. And for some reason, that word and reading what was underneath that word kind of triggered something in me. And I thought, oh, that reminds me of my friends, because most of my friends were autistic. So I went home to mum and I asked her, okay, so are my friends autistic? And she answered honestly and said yes. And then I connected the dots and asked, am I autistic? And she said yes. Because I kind of was in a primary school where being different was quite normal and I had a lot of neurodivergent friends, I didn't really think much more about it until about high school, where things like bullying and ostracization started, and I was experiencing this from teachers and also fellow peers. And so this kind of made me feel a bit abnormal and I didn't see different in a positive way at that point. And so I started questioning what autism meant for me at about the age of 13. I was really lucky to meet some amazing autistic adults, and they acted as kind of mentors for me. I'm still in touch with them. And they taught me that autism was a difference. I should not feel ashamed about it, and that it's not a disorder. And whilst we were all different, they taught me that we're all successful in our unique ways. All of them were very successful. They were in different fields, but we all found areas where we shared commonalities and we were able to bond together. And I eventually was able to find my tribe within the autistic community and also some of the non-autistic community as well. But the key theme here was that I learned not to feel ashamed of myself. I learned that it was a positive thing being different and that there are ways of harnessing my strengths, even though we live in a world which is not always autism friendly. So some of the ways it really helped me embrace a positive autistic identity was focusing on my strengths rather than my own perceived deficits or weaknesses, connecting with like-minded individuals through either my interests or neurology. So not all of the individuals I interacted with were neurodivergent or autistic, although majority of them are. And if they're not, I've diagnosed them. But it could be that I went to music club or art club or went to the animals section where there were like-minded people who were appreciative of my info dumping and actually took an interest in my levels of expertise in my areas of interest and passions. It also helped immersing myself in these areas of interest and really finding what sparked me, what made me click, what really motivated me to learn. And my school was very good in encouraging this. And also, it's so important for me to be able to know how to seek support, especially for things around mental health. A lot of us autistic individuals, a lot of us autistics in the community will have co-occurring mental health conditions. And it's important that we are aware that we can actually seek support and where support can be found as well. And my parent was very good in helping me find adequate support. Receiving accommodations at school and adapting my work environment to suit my unique needs was an incredibly helpful thing. And these are skills now that I'll take into my workplace and even my university studies. I have my own EIP, an individualized plan, even at university. And it's incredibly important that we learn what exactly we need for accommodations and how to advocate for those accommodations as well. This is where parents can be extremely helpful. Another big thing for me was learning to unmask. I'm an extremely good masker. I was echolalic when I was younger. I'm very good at mimicking other people. And sometimes I wouldn't stop and listen to my body and listen to my mind when it was telling me this is too much. I think for me, I felt the pressure of trying to conform to neuronormative standards to try and achieve similar things that neurotypicals might be doing rather than focusing on my individual pathway, because I thought that this would make me a lesser person, which I know now is not true. Everyone has a different pathway, and it's no pathway is wrong or less, it's just different. And we need to respect our neurology and respect our individuality going into the future. So things like going at my own pace was very important. And of course, having that parent mentor was invaluable and still is to this day. We have an incredible connection. My mum is extremely supportive of my autistic identity. She was ahead of her time and was very interested in helping me harness my strengths and not seeing autism as a deficit. So she read up a lot about autism. She actually did a master's degree that was specific in autism education. She's currently working in learning diversity and helping kids like me that are misunderstood. She read a lot of autobiographies, speakers, and autism experts, but she really took a huge interest in autistic adults and their voices. She would go onto forums online that were autistic individuals expressing their opinions and insights on certain things. And she has huge printouts of some of the amazing things that these adults helped with sharing. She could not understand what I was going through as a child because I couldn't articulate that. So having autistic adults sharing their journeys and sharing what their experiences in certain environments had been was incredibly helpful to her, and it provided a window into my autistic mind. I received a lot of early supports, not just in a clinical setting, but with friends and family. So my mum and I often talk about this sort of focus on early support and intervention. And yes, whilst it's important, sure, shouldn't just be that. It should be educating other people on how to accommodate us at home, doing connection exercises at home as a family, things like that are just as good as going to a clinic. And I think it's important to get that balance between, yes, going to therapy, going to get adequate support to help us, but also not overloading us to the point where we're doing too much of that. Sometimes it can just be nice to have me do autistic play and have my mum interacting with me and things like that. And that's some of the things she used to do with me. I used to have an animal set, and I'd line them up in huge lines throughout the playroom, and it would fill the whole playroom. And my mum would often either just watch or try and interact with me and not try and change my autistic play, but contribute and try and learn from that. And she actually related to it as well. She was very good at playing to my interests and strengths to help engage me. She always encouraged me to be my own advocate. She provided me the platform to advocate for myself. And sometimes that means also that I'll ask her, can you come in with me to help advocate or things like that? But she always was interested in getting my own voice and perspective in any decisions surrounding me. It won't always be perfect. You're allowed to make mistakes as a parent, and mum is open about the fact that she has made mistakes in the past, but that's just about being human. We need to have a growth mindset, and if you stuff up, don't beat yourself up about it. Use it as a learning opportunity. Encourage that growth mindset. And it's also helpful for us autistics to know that no one is perfect, and using that to admit that you're not perfect and use it as a connection exercise. So it's a journey, and it won't always be easy, and that's okay. And it's all right to admit that as well. Self-esteem, I think, is a really important topic, especially when we're looking on embracing a positive autistic identity. A lot of us autistics can experience low self-esteem, sometimes by feeling alienated or experiencing things like exclusion or bullying, or even not knowing what is different about us. I mean, I was lucky to know that I was autistic, but some people aren't diagnosed until well into adulthood and things like that. So not having that self-awareness can be very confusing. Many autistic self-advocates also assert that autism is not a label, it's a diagnosis and a way of describing how our brain works. It's a vital fact about ourselves. And I think it's important that we embrace this diagnosis and realize that it's part of our neurology, it's part of our wiring. It's not something abnormal or wrong. It's not something that makes us crazy. It's just something different. And I think that receiving a diagnosis can be incredibly empowering. I have a couple of friends who are late diagnosed, and they said it really helped them. It's been a bit of a process to get their friends on board, of course, but the self-awareness that has come from it, the acceptance, the community that they've found through this diagnosis has been incredibly, incredibly empowering. I often too find myself describing my identity not so much in emotions or emotive words, but actions or in my areas of interest. So, for example, I might say I love animals, rather than explaining an aspect of my personality, like being compassionate or kind or things like that. I don't generally start with that or even mention it at all. I think for me, this stems from the fact that I like to explain concrete facts about myself, and they're easy to discern. They're not an ambiguous term, because things like kind and compassionate, they're kind of abstract concepts and they're very personal. And this made me uncomfortable too, describing myself like this. And so I often find myself defined and comforted by the actions and activities I partake in. And you may find this with other autistic individuals. But yeah, I think it's important to be aware that the way that we describe ourselves may be different. So if you're doing, for example, an exercise where you look at our strengths, you may find that we start to list our passions. My love of computers or Pokemon or horses, that they're the things that we feel positive by and we are comforted by, because our areas of interest can be incredibly supportive for us because they're always there, they're always concrete, and often we will go into careers that are based around our areas of interest. I think it's important also to know, as an autistic individual, that the bad times won't necessarily last, and it doesn't make us a failure to experience dark times. I would often conceal when I was going through times because I thought I'd failed as a human being, which is not true at all. Had I realized that earlier, I might have been able to reach out to support a lot earlier. I think too, it's important to remind ourselves we've survived through dark times in the past, and we need to have confidence in ourselves that we'll be able to do so again. I think increasing self-esteem is incredibly important because it can help with things like socializing, being able to find our tribe and people who we can connect to, self-confidence, and also independence. I think some of the things you can do is start writing about these positives, even as a family exercise. You don't have to be autistic to list your positives. And take the attention away from our negative thoughts and our negative thought processes, and see how all of us, our neurodiverse community, all of us have strengths to offer to the world. And things like that can be really helpful. I often will write things that I like about myself and I'll put it on my whiteboard just so then even when I come home, I can remind myself, okay, there are things about me that I like. It could be a good visual reminder. So what does a positive autistic identity exactly look like? Well, this is something that's incredibly personal. Like every autistic person will have a different autistic identity because autism is an incredibly diverse spectrum, and all of us have different experiences because we're all individuals. But for me, I personally believe that it's things like viewing it as a neurological difference, in line with the neurodiversity movement, not viewing it as just a disorder or a disease or an illness or even a disability. I quite like the social model of disability, which kind of looks at the fact that we are not disabled by ourselves, but it's actually the environment surrounding us that we are disabled by. And I really like this viewpoint because it shows that we do have strengths and things to contribute to the community. We just need the right support and the right nurturing environment to do so. And I think it's important that we view autism as not just a part of us, but who we are. And this is where the importance of language comes in, particularly when looking at the issue of identity first language as opposed to person first language. So a lot of our self advocates and also other allies prefer the terminology such as autistic or autistic person or autistic individual or on the spectrum or things like that rather than with autism, because I personally feel that autism is a part of my inherent identity. I cannot separate my personality from my autism because it's in my brain, it's my wiring. If you remove my autism, I wouldn't be me. And I think this is important to see this because it's helped me feel proud of being autistic. And again, pride is something that will be different for everyone. We don't necessarily have to, go out and proclaim to the world I'm autistic to be proud of ourselves. This will look different for everyone. And I think when we view autism as our strength and not something to feel ashamed about or feel like we have to conceal, it can increase our self-confidence and self-esteem. Honestly, this might be a thing that goes into adulthood that you work on. I'm still working through it, and there are times when it is hard to find the positives. But it's important that we trust ourselves, our experiences, and our intuition, and we find the right support and our tribe and people who lift us up and increase our self-esteem to help us through this. And this is where parents can be really amazing at this. Lastly, how can parents help facilitate a positive autistic identity? Well, I think it's important that we have examples, not just from real life, but anything about autistic people in the media, as celebrities, in fiction, all that sort of thing. So you might want to introduce them to autistic celebrities or figures. There's quite a lot of them. Daryl Hannah, Eminem's actually one of them, incredibly successful rapper. Dan Aykroyd, who created Ghostbusters, Anthony Hopkins. These are all very successful actors who have thrived in their careers because of their autism and not despite them. There are even examples of autistic fictional characters. Some of them aren't confirmed, but I don't think this matters. A lot of them are neurodivergent and things like that, which can be helpful if you don't have a friend or a peer that's autistic themselves to base this on. I know that sometimes we haven't quite found our tribe yet, so it can be helpful having other examples from real life. And I think it's not a bad thing if you haven't found your people yet. Sometimes it will take a longer time. A lot of us really value friendship on a very deep level, and I think taking our time is not necessarily a bad thing. So don't be discouraged. Just keep on doing what you're doing, and your positivity will help you find like-minded people who share your interests or your neurology and accept you for exactly who you are. Things like going to autism-specific events for autistic socializing can be really good. And thankfully, these are increasing, and a lot of them are starting to be autistic-led now and things like that, which is absolutely brilliant. I've mentioned this quite a lot in this talk. help the autistic person advocate for themselves. So things like involving us in decision making, and of course advocating on our behalf when necessary. But I think things like, for example, my school, we all had ILPs, every student did, and we were encouraged to shape our own education, to make a plan of what we wanted to achieve in our schooling. And so from minute one, from year 7, I was involved in my own decision making. And that's incredibly empowering to be able to take control of our education, to take control of our lives. And these are skills that will follow us well into adulthood if we go into a workplace, learning how to advocate for ourselves and also reaching out for help if we're experiencing difficulties. I think it's also really valuable to set up the individual with an autistic adult mentor. I think this can be really great to have someone who might share similar experiences and also maybe have gone through the same things, and even just to say, hey, I get it, I've been through the same thing, can be incredibly comforting to just have someone go, I get you, I hear you, I went through the same thing and I came out the other side. I think also doing family positivity activities to facilitate growth mindset can be good for everyone involved, not just the autistic person. I think viewing the beauty of diversity as a whole can be really very valuable. And of course, looking at all of our strengths of what we can contribute. It's also important we acknowledge our difficulties and accommodating our environment to help enhance our strengths and help us thrive and demonstrate what we can contribute. So things like noise cancelling headphones, helping people use assistive technology like voice to text or dictation software if you struggle with writing and things like that, or augmentative alternative communication, which is AACs for non-speaking people, to help them communicate with others, using sunglasses or tinted lenses if you have light sensitivity, and or even reduce hours at school. Sometimes we might not be able to do school or work or university or tertiary education full time, and this is okay. I think it's important that these accommodations are put in place to emphasize to the student that it's okay to take a break, because if we don't learn that, we might experience autistic burnout and learn to mask. And this can have an extremely negative effect on our mental health and well-being over time. Being able to just say, hey, I'm not coping right now, can I get an extension for this assignment? Or taking a break or taking a day off and taking that time out for yourself, it frees up your mind and it will help them succeed more at school. So I think this is incredibly important from minute one. Consult with the students, see what accommodations need to be made, and involve them as well with the school or wherever they might be experiencing these challenges to help them succeed, set them up for success. So that's all I have today. If you want to learn more about this sort of thing, there are some amazing autistic advocates to follow. I also have resources on my website. I often post blogs and things like that. And I list also other autistic-led organizations and blogs and things that I like. So you can find me at www.autismactually.com.au. We're also on social media if you'd like to get in touch and learn more about what we do. There are some also other awesome organizations you can follow, like Yellow Ladybugs and the I Can Network in Australia, and they're just absolutely fabulous. They're autistic-led and they're all about looking at strengths and positives and neurodiversity and helping young people and older people as well succeed. So thanks again for listening. I hope you enjoyed it today, and I look forward to seeing you in the Q&A. And yeah, stay awesome. See you. Bye.